Tom, tell us about Judge Graves.
Well, I'd like to start with reading out of a publication about his early life. His name was George Raymond Graves. And I'll read what was in the book. Public-spirited and active in general interest of the community in which he resides, a lawyer adhering rigidly to the highest ideals of his profession, and is the enjoyment of a large practice. George Raymond Graves of Nunda, Livingston County, New York, sheds luster on the profession to which he belongs. He was born at South Butler, Wayne County, New York, on May 20th, 1878, the son of George P. and Mary Chamberlain Graves, who were the parents of 3 children. After receiving his education in the grade and high schools of Walcott, New York, George Raymond Graves read law at Walcott and in the office of Chamberlain and Page of Rochester, New York, and then was managing clerk for 5 years. He was admitted to the bar in January of 1900 and began general practice at Nunda in 1902. Mr. Graves is Secretary and Treasurer of the Livingston County Bar Association and is an independent Republican in his political opinions and has been police justice for 16 years. On February 12, 1902, Mr. Graves was married to Joan Marsh of Rochester. 3 children have been born to them: Marion C., a student at the University of Rochester, Ogden M., and John H. Fraternally, he is affiliated with the Masonic Order and he attends the Presbyterian Church in Nunda.
So what do you remember of him?
Well, I have quite a few memories of the judge. Now, we have a picture of his face, and you can see it's a young picture. He was a slender-built man. He was tall, and the only man I ever knew that could smoke a cigarette and kind of whistle at the same time. Now, I don't mean a traditional whistle. I mean a shh, 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 shh kind of thing. And his cigarette quite often just hung off the lower lip. I don't know how he ever did it, but it was an unusual presentation. Anyway, he lived in the house, the White House, still there, right on the corner of Mill and Church Street, right across from the school corner. And he had a 2-story barn in back of the house. And he allowed some students to park their bikes there while they attended school. So we were allowed to, and we would ride up to the barn, park our bikes in there, and just a short walk across the street. We're at school. Because it was a half-mile walk from where we lived on Vermont Street to the school. And of course, in the wintertime, we couldn't ride our bikes, so we walked it. Now, it'd be easy, wait for the bus. Well, anyway, he alone and Joe Tallman, Reggie told me that they were about the first to have TV in Nunda, about the first ones that had one in their house. Now, he allowed the grade school children to come over class by class to see the TV in action. And they would come just across the street, come in the front door on Mill Street, and file slowly past the TV that was playing, and exit out the side door and back to school. And that was a nice gesture of the judge. One of his sons, it would be Ogden, and wife Ines, was our next door neighbor. They had the stucco house right on the corner of Church and Vermont, and we were over there quite a bit. Okie, and they had 2 children. Okie, the older one, he probably class of 50, and I was class of 53, so he was 2 or 3 years older than I. Mary Ellen was a classmate of mine. So we had quite a bit in common. Occasionally, Okie would ask me, let's go up to the judges. It was a Friday night. Let's go up to the judges and watch it's called the Gillette Cavalcade of Sports, I believe. But anyways, the boxing matches. So we'd go up, and the judge was in his easy chair, and he was right into the fight. I mean, he loved the fight so much that he'd mimic some of the punches. Get up sometimes. And no, he says, go to him, And he was right into it. Well, they would have a commercial break or something and between fights, and he'd holler out to his wife out in the kitchen, Dodgy, that was her nickname, bring these nice boys in some cookies and milk. And that was a surprise, and they were good cookies. Now, the judge loved to gamble. He loved playing poker. And Chief McCall told me once that when he apparently had an office in the Livingston block up on the second story, and occasionally he would host a poker game. Now, when the word got around that they were playing at the judge's office, they had no trouble in finding 6 other men to play, because they played with 7, because the judge, he knew the poker game well, but he was a poor gambler. He won against the odds. He stayed in the game too long and he would lose eventually. He might have a pair of aces and say, oh boy, I'm going to get a royal flush and nothing else to go with it. Somebody would have 2 pair and beat him. Well, anyway, but he loved to gamble. So, his grandson, Okie, told me one time that the judge would get him to go real early in the morning to Rochester. Okie'd have to get up real early and accompany the judge to ride to Rochester. And the judge would drive down, I think it was River Street, right near the river, kind of a seedy part of town. And he would get there early, before the store was even open. And they'd wait in the car. As soon as the door swung open, judge would rush out and go in. Well, it was a Jewish merchant. And he had clothing. He sold clothing. And it's an old Jewish custom that the first customer, they would give a discount to. And that would bring them real prosperous day the rest of the day. So that's the way the judge operated. And he'd buy everything, socks, handkerchiefs, everything that he needed, and maybe they would go in not more than twice a year, but Okie can remember that, and I remember him telling me that little story. Now, he lived on the corner, as I mentioned earlier, and next to him, the brick house, Jim and Sturdy Doyle lived there. And Sturdy was a commercial teacher at Nunda High School for years and years. And they were good friends. But Sturdy loved birds. She loved to feed them. And it's kind of close between the 2 houses. And most of the birds were pigeons. Well, the pigeons would fly up on the judge's roof and relieve themselves. And the judge got ticked off at this. He says, I can't have that. So apparently he saw an ad somewhere about hotfoot. Well, he come in the store one day and he says, Mr. Byrnes, can you get hotfoot? I says, hotfoot? I says, well, I've never heard of the product. What's it used for? And he explained to me, you paint this paste on the very top ledge of the roof where the pigeons lay. And they'll light on there and give them a hot foot and they'll fly off. I said, geez, I don't know if I've never heard of it. Let me call my supplier. So I called the supplier and they had never heard of it. Can't get it. So I remember well, on the way out, he walked out through from the cashier out. It was a fairly good distance. And he kind of mumbled in a sing-songy way, the birds, the sturdy birds, or the birds, the dirty birds, sturdy feeds them. How'd he go? Well, anyway, we'll get back to gambling. Judge liked to do some of his business in town, double or nothing. And once a month, he would come up and get a haircut from Honest Joe the barber, Joe Perino, and then he'd come over to our store. He had a $6 prescription once a month for his wife, and he'd usually get a $3 box of candy, $9. So he'd come in, and if he was in kind of good mood and kind of whistling a little bit, we found out he'd taken Honest Joe. And if he came in kind of sullen, not whistling, we figured Honest Joe took him. So when it came time to settle up, Dad always waited on him. The judge would say, "All right, Paul, double or nothing." He'd reach into his pocket, and he'd come out with a whole fistful of coins. He'd slap them down on the Gillette glass case top counter. Dad would quickly cover it with a sheet of paper, and it was up to Dad to call odd or even. So say there's 10 coins under that sheet, and Dad called even. He'd count them out, and Dad would win. So the judge had to pay him double. So 9 becomes $18. If there was 9 coins, the judge would win and he'd get her free. So Dad kind of wondered. He says, I think he knows how many coins are in his pocket when he comes in here. So he started to keep a little record of one time was odd, next time was even, whatever, and he found kind of a little pattern there. So he bet on the pattern, and he says, "I'm sure I was ahead of Judge when he passed away." But, that's something that I'll never forget, because the clerks, we always paid attention just how things were going to turn out, And the judge would, if he won, he'd go out with the candy and the script and that little whistle. He was happy. So I can tell other stories about the judge, but I don't think it'd be appropriate because some of the people I would tell about the relatives are still around. But I tell you who could tell a lot more stories than I, and I wish he was still here, would be Bob Rabweir. He remembers the judge real well.
Can you say, now he was a judge,
Yeah.
justice of the peace, or
Yeah.
the town justice,
Yeah.
village justice,
And you could hire him for a case.
legal services.
Yeah.
Did he have a really good reputation?
He did. He did because I wish I could remember the story exactly how it was. I think Rab told me this. Somebody was being sued about manure that he got from a farmer, and he thought that maybe he had a case, so he went to the judge, and somehow the judge was able to prove that the manure was adulterated. And the reason he was able to prove it, he asked the farmer, he says, "You have chickens?" "Yeah, I have chickens." He says, "Well, are they free range or in the coop?" "No, they're free range, they run all over." Well, they ran through the barnyard and they adulterated the cow manure. And he won the darn case. So he was sharp. He was sharp. I've got a real good story, but I don't want to tell it. But anyway, it's he was a colorful lawyer, a town lawyer, well known, but he was colorful. And they also said he was real good on getting your money back on the income taxes. And his daughter, Mary Ellen, lives in Washington, and she's written a nice summary on it. And I'm going to read it today when I go home, but she has fond memories of the judge. And Ogden, her father, Oki's father too, he worked construction. He did a lot of work when Sampson Air Base was going, not the air base, I guess it was the naval base before that. And he was basically a carpenter, excellent gardener. He had the garden between their house and ours, and his enjoyment was being out there on a Sunday with the radio on, the Cardinals were playing, and he would enjoy his garden. I remember it well. So that's my story on the judge, and I could tell more, but I'll leave it at that.